Hi everybody, it's Armin. Today we're going to be installing a set of cams into this NC Miata. It only has full exhaust on it, so otherwise being fully stock, this will be the most stock car I've installed some cams into, which should be interesting for some results. So this is also the first car that I will be camming that is just a 2-liter. We have a full exhaust on the car, and after this we'll just be throwing on a tune from Zero Limit. Well, we're installing a set of BCO 402 cams and a set of BCO 400 springs, and that's pretty much it. So the first steps here, lift up the front of the car, drain the oil, and we're going to do the rest of the stuff on camera. Those are the only other things that I have not done on camera. So we will start off by dropping the brackets that hold up the sway bar. That'll give us better access to the crank pulley. We'll take the hood off, we'll take everything else off from up here, and we'll dive right in. All right, let's take a recap of what's been done so far. As you saw, I took apart the upper portion, removed the hood. That gives me better access to the back end of the head. Really, that's not super necessary unless you're doing valve springs or if it's a 2.5 for access purposes. Obviously, I took off, the valve cover, the front cover. Now with the front cover, there's a couple of notes here. With the front cover, when you're getting down to these, you're getting down to these bottom ones, you don't have good access because of the crank pulley. So what I did is, you probably didn't notice, but I felt around on the front of the crank pulley for this little hole. That little hole right there indicates BDC or TDC of any cylinder. It's supposed to be downward to indicate TDC of the first cylinder, but again, it's a 4-cylinder, so that means if this is straight up or straight down, one of the cylinders is at TDC, and we don't want that for the next portion, which we're going to be doing. So after you get this guy off of there, you can get the bottom 4 bolts. Those are kind of difficult, so I moved one of the power steering lines out of the way, and actually it's something I haven't had to do before. On the 2-liter specifically, there's the stud right below the crank pulley. That one is actually a bolt stud, and it started rounding on me. So what I had to do is, I have one of these insiders, and the Milwaukee Insider ratchet, and I had to use this so I could get the full thing on there, and I'd use this in order to turn against it because I was trying to round with one of my open end wrenches. Even the box end. So the next steps we're going to go through are going to be cleaning up the front of the, taking down all of the timing components, since I know we're not at TDC. Now's a good time actually if you want to re-verify. Let's do that real quick. So, take this guy, there you go. It's pretty down there, it's pretty up there. So we don't know how far down or up. So what we can actually do is we can take a mirror and we can look, or we can feel down into the oil pan and see if the counterweight or the cylinder one counterweight or the cylinder one rod end is near the bottom. And then you can feel if it's close to top dead center. I'd say if you're 30 degrees off, you're fine. So what we're going to end up doing is taking apart the timing components, taking out the cams. We're going to do all the valve springs, clean up the front, clean up the top. That's kind of the usual process if you've seen my other videos. If you're actually looking for a full walkthrough, obviously watch one of the other videos. This isn't it. Cool. Let's keep on. Okay, I'm back from lunch now. Let's go ahead and get to doing these valve springs. So if you've seen my other videos, we're going to use, where is it? There it is. We're going to use leak down tester. We're going to stick it down in, let's say, cylinder 1. It doesn't matter which order you do these in. We're going to go ahead and stick it down in cylinder 1. We're going to pressure up the cylinder. It's going to push down that piston. And then we're going to use our Company 23 valve spring compressor tool. I sell these on my website, along with everything else you need to do your own 2.5 swaps, cam installs, whatever, all that stuff. I sell it. And we're just going to sit this guy on there. It makes our life a ton easier for changing out these valve springs. Actually, before we dive into that, I'm going to go ahead. I have a ton of extra keepers on hand. I'm going to go ahead and assemble my valve springs and the keepers together, so that we just have an easy in and out process. I want to take a second and just mention that these are actually significantly harder to install than the other ones I've installed before. If you notice, I'm battling a little bit more, and I'll show you the reason. It's that these spring sets, there's a slight height difference, but also there's the diameter difference. So when our little cup sits over it, the little cage piece that pushes down on the spring, the cage actually sits lower on this because of the smaller diameter. It sits a lot taller on top of this. So what I'm having to do is take my tool, unbolt it, put the little cages in place, then bolt it down. Because otherwise what happened on the first one is the retainers just started popping out, or the keepers rather. The keepers started popping out, and we don't want that to happen. I've also noticed on these aftermarket springs, not just these, but other ones I've installed, the way they construct the actual retainer piece itself is a lot tighter of a cone. The OEM one is actually a lot looser of a cone, which makes it a lot easier to get those keepers to line up. So that's another reason to follow what I'm doing with my the technique I use is when I'm going to tighten it down, I put a finger inside of the cage and I hold those keepers down so they stay in position instead of being pushed out as the spring is compressed. So normally I do this in order 1, 4, 3, 2, but because we're in car, I'm going to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to get as much practice as I can in on 1, 2, and 3 before I have to do 4, because 4 is always the hardest one. I believe this is actually the first time I've been able to use the Company 23 tool inside of someone's engine bay as well. I don't remember if I did on the other one, but it's a heck of a lot easier than having to use the lever tool because you have both hands free. All right, so let's proceed. Okay, as you'll see, I've dropped the cams in now. We've got all the valve springs installed. That was an adventure. And now we're going to need to change the position of the crank because it is currently at TDC on cylinders 2 and 3. Because of that, we can't spin our cams over. We don't even want to tighten the cams down because, of course, there could be interference. So what we're going to do is, because we're at TDC on cylinders 2 and 3, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the crank forward as much as I possibly can, so maybe like 90 degrees-ish or so. Because after the installation of the cams, we just want to be able to roll the crank forward another 90 degrees to be at TDC on cylinder 1. And that'll be for assembly purposes. So I'm going to stick a crank bolt into there. I'm going to spin it forward. And then I'm going to just, if you just gently spin it forward, then you can break it loose backwards with a ratchet just real quick. Doesn't matter if it's perfectly at 90B TDC or not. The purpose is to make sure that we're not interfering while we're spinning our cams. So let's proceed. So before I started with putting in all that stuff, I already wrote down all of my bucket sizes into my little chart here. It's like, as you've seen me do in all my other videos. So we write down all of the bucket sizes that go in. That way after we assemble everything and spin the cams over, we can take our measurements down and immediately go over to the calculator. So I've already been to the calculator and I've calculated which buckets I need in order to complete this task. Based on the ones I already have that I will no longer be using and the ones that I need that are different, I only need to go grab 6 buckets off of the shelf. So I'm going to take everything back apart up here. I'm going to move over to this set of buckets that I've now written down, and that's it. These actually came out very close. These are probably the closest set I've ever had on an install. Everything is actually pretty much within passing spec, but I'm a little more of a stickler than that, so these need to be dead on. We're going for all 8s on the intake and all 10s on the exhaust. So I'm going to run over to the wall, grab all the buckets, and then continue. Okay, it looks like I forgot to hit record. All I did was I took the cam caps off, so you didn't miss much. All right, I went and got some lights so we can have a little more light over here. Okay, so as you saw, I've cleaned off these couple of components. I have the two cam gears in here. They're loose right now. We're gonna take care of putting in the oil pump gear. I'm gonna put a dab of Loctite on it because it's very difficult to torque it in the position it's in. I end up using a... I've damaged my, my snap ring pliers, you can see, from using them. But I think I've used these for a lot of stuff that's not snap ring pliers, mainly taking on and off oil pump gears. So it is important to remember that we need to put on one crank washer first. So we're gonna get that crank washer out, we're gonna stick it on. Once again, I've already gone over and made sure everything is as clean as possible. I'm not gonna touch the face of that. Let's see, let's get that guy on there. All right, now we're gonna put on the oil pump gear at the same time as we put on the chain and the crank gear. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to put a whole bunch of stuff away. We've now completed the torque sequence on the cams. So the next step is going to be installing the front cover. After we have the front cover off, we're going to just let it sit overnight, dry, That way we have the best seal possible. I'll tighten all those bolts in the morning, and then we'll put on the crank pulley and the valve cover. We can't put the valve cover on any sooner because of the cam holder in the back. So now it's time to go ahead and tighten up all the bolts, and we're going to put on the crank pulley, tighten that bolt, get all that timing set, spin it over, verify we're at good timing, and then reassemble. All right, you probably seen me do a good bit of cleaning for the last couple of minutes now, and it's because it looks like the power steering tank has been overflowing, and it just covered everything from the subframe to the crossbar in just this, film of nasty stuff because it's picked up dirt, etc. When I had the timing apart, while I was in there doing all of my front end cleaning, I cleaned off as much as I could of the subframe. Now that I'm reassembling, I took care of just cleaning up what I could on the crossbar, and man, I was really trying to do this guy a solid, but I'll say I gave it a good maybe 70% because there's a whole lot of nooks and crannies and stuff. It probably needs to be hit with a pressure washer to really get in there. I was just trying to do a solid here, so hope you're happy with what I did there. I'm going to continue reassembling.